The movie begins with a character named Seth, an ordinary guy living a routine life. Today, we see him wake up and start his daily routine, taking the first bus to his job. Seth works at an animal care center, and he starts his shift by moving around to feed and take care of the animals there. That's how his day goes, and by the end of it, he takes the bus to head back home. On the way, he spots a beautiful girl on the bus who looks familiar to him, so he asks her, "Are you Jarlene?" She responds, saying yes, and that they know each other. Through their conversation, we learn that Seth went to Westbrook High School with her, though he was a year ahead of her, which might be why she doesn't remember him well. But now, she starts to recall. Holly is a bit surprised, but she starts chatting with him. During this talk, we find out that Holly works as a writer. Seth invites her to get some ice cream together, and it's clear that he's interested in her, but Holly politely declines and gets off at her stop. That night, Seth goes online, looking up Holly's profile until he finds it and discovers that she's single, which cheers him up a bit. The next day, Seth heads to work as usual and chats with his coworker, Nate, asking for advice on how to talk to a girl he likes. Surprisingly, Nate tells Seth that he's usually a loner and barely speaks to anyone, which is why he's surprised Seth came to ask for advice. Feeling embarrassed, Seth starts to walk away, but Nate stops him, offering some tips on how to approach a girl. Around that time, Seth's supervisor, John D., comes over and informs him that Dr. Joseph, the center's owner, wants to take a dog named Lexi to the examination room to put her down. Lexi is a dog at the center with severe health problems, and Dr. Joseph has decided to end her suffering. Seth feels sad because he cares about Lexi, but there's nothing he can do. He takes Lexi to Dr. Joseph, who tells Seth he can take her home if he really cares about her. But Seth declines, saying he doesn't have the money for it and that his neighbors might complain. Before giving Lexi the lethal injection, Dr. Joseph tells Seth he's a coward who doesn't know how to make any bold decisions in his life, and that it's his worst quality. After Lexi receives the injection and passes away, Seth, feeling sorrowful, takes her to the crematorium. Later that night, Seth goes home and continues searching for more information about Holly, taking notes on all the things she likes and dislikes. During his search, he realizes that Holly works at a cafe, not as a writer, as she told him. This upsets him because he realizes she was trying to end the conversation with him any way she could and wasn't truthful about herself, which shows she didn't feel comfortable with him. The next day, Seth goes to the cafe where Holly works, and when she comes over to take his order, he starts reminding her who he is until she recalls. She does recognize him, but she doesn't speak to him warmly at all. She just takes his order and walks away without showing any interest. After that, she comes over to ask him what he thinks of the food, but Seth doesn't respond to her question. Instead, he asks her if she'd like to go to a party with him, and tells her he's interested in getting closer to her. Holly firmly rejects him, saying she has a boyfriend and asks him not to talk to her again. At that moment, Seth feels hurt but doesn't respond to her words. After a long day at work, Holly returns home, and we discover she lives with her close friend, Claire. As they sit together, Holly's boyfriend, Eric, calls her. It turns out they've been fighting for a while, and Eric is trying to reconcile, but Holly still refuses and hangs up. Claire talks to her and tells her that Eric loves her, and it might be best to get back together, but Holly insists she won't go back to him. The next day, Holly goes to work at the cafe and finds a bouquet of flowers without a name. She assumes it's from Eric, so later that night, she goes to the bar where he works and asks him why he sent her flowers. Eric, surprised, tells her he didn't send anything and tries to make up with her. Holly, however, gets upset, realizing the flowers weren't from him. She confronts Eric, accusing him of being unfaithful and reminding him of how many times he cheated, which is why she can't continue with him. She leaves him and steps outside to smoke a cigarette to calm herself down. While she's sitting there, a man comes over and sits next to her with his back turned, so she can't see his face. This man turns out to be Seth, who, as we find out, has been obsessively following her. Seth tries to console her, and she thanks him and begins to walk away, but he stops her. At this point, Holly feels worried and suspects that Seth has been stalking her. She confronts him about it, but he tries to reassure her that he's not following her and that he's not a weirdo. He says he's just interested in her and wants a chance to talk to her, but Holly isn't convinced. She heads back into the bar, where Eric sees the entire situation and gets angry. Eric grabs Seth and beats him up mercilessly, humiliating him in front of everyone, and finally throws him out of the bar. Although Seth feels humiliated and hurt, he notices that Holly's diary had fallen without her noticing, which makes him happy. He picks it up and starts reading, learning everything about Holly's life. One day, while Seth is at work, he's wandering around the animal care center and discovers an underground basement full of scraps, metal, and tools used to make animal cages. This discovery makes him ecstatic, and he immediately starts constructing a metal cage. Later, he takes some animal sedatives from the center, mixes them together, and tries them on himself, causing him to pass out momentarily, as a test run for his plan. The following day, he follows Holly all the way to her house. At the right moment, he breaks into her home and appears out of nowhere, using the sedative mixture on her until she passes out. Then he places her in a box and takes her back to the center, intending to move her down to the basement. On his way down, he's stopped by his coworker, Nate, who asks him what's in the box. Seth, feeling nervous, tells Nate it's a new order that John D. asked him to put in the basement, so Nate doesn't think twice and lets him go. Seth takes the box containing Holly and brings it down to the basement. After a while, Holly wakes up to find herself trapped inside the metal cage in the center's basement. She's horrified and has no idea how she ended up there. She tries to open the cage to escape but fails, and she starts screaming, hoping someone will hear and save her. But unfortunately, no one will ever hear her since the basement is deep underground, and the cage is nearly soundproof. The next day, Seth comes to see Holly with some food. First, he places a small bowl for her to use as a bathroom like an animal, and then he places the food down, telling her that he kidnapped and locked her up here for her own good. He asks her to be respectful so he'll treat her well. Naturally, Holly insults him, and Seth, angered, tells her, "You messed up, so no food for you," then takes the food away and leaves. The next day, he comes to her again with food. He places the food and water in front of her, and this time, exhausted, she overcomes her limits and drinks and eats. She tries to grab his leg and begs him to let her go. Syth tells her that he's holding her for her own good and that there have to be boundaries in their relationship. She can't just grab him like that. What she did was wrong, and she needs to be punished for it. The punishment is that he won't talk to her or explain why he kidnapped her, like he initially planned. Then he leaves, walking away angry. After he leaves, Holly sits alone, and we see that she's a bit crazy because she keeps imagining her friend Claire telling her that Syth is definitely going to kill her. She keeps talking to Claire as if she's sitting right in front of her, even though that's not real, of course. After that, she gets up to use the bathroom in the animal crate. At that moment, a rat comes near her, and she gets scared, violently hitting it. The next day, Syth comes to her as usual and gets rid of the dead rat, sitting with her. Holly takes advantage of the opportunity and asks him why he kidnapped her and whether he plans to assault her or not. Syth responds that he kidnapped her to save her and assures her that he won't assault her or anything like that. She's surprised and asks, "Save me from what?" Syth replies, "I know you, and I know everything about you. I know you're sick and present yourself to the world differently from your real life, and that's why I kidnapped you." At that moment, Holly feels anxious and starts to beg him to let her go, but Syth firmly refuses and leaves. By coincidence, he sees Neat and takes advantage of the situation to ask him if he was in the cellar. Neat advises Syth to go down there because there's a lot of junk, and if anything gets stolen, it'll get lost in the mess. The next day, Syth comes to Holly again, but this time he has her diary with him. He tells her that he read it and learned everything about her, including her views on love, which is that both parties should sacrifice and give up certain things for their relationship to last. But Syth tells her that's wrong, and the best relationships are when each person gives everything they have to the one they love. He continues talking to her and asks about Claire because he hears them talking every day when he comes out of the cellar. Or rather, he only hears her talking and answering herself. He tells her that Claire isn't around and realizes that lately, Claire hasn't been living with her at home, and that Holly has been imagining her. Syth starts reading her diary, and we discover that one day, Holly was with Claire in the car, going somewhere, and they ended up having an accident. During that time, Holly told Claire that she knew she was cheating on her with Eric. Claire got scared and kept telling her it was just a fling and that she would be fine. But Holly didn't care about that, and kept driving the car at a crazy speed until they crashed. When Holly saw that Claire was still alive, she stabbed her in the eye with a knife and killed her. Since that moment, Holly started imagining Claire everywhere. Syth knows that killing Claire was justified, but killing people for no reason, which she also wrote about in her diary, isn't justified. Of course, Holly feels scared and realizes that these are just stories she's making up because she's gifted in writing. Syth tells her that he thought that way at first, but he watched her for a while before kidnapping her and saw with his own eyes how she killed innocent people who hadn't done anything to her. That's the main reason he kidnapped her, to cure her of her sickness and her killing of people for no reason. At that moment, Holly realizes that he's uncovered her truth, so she begs him to save her and treat her. Syth tells her that he's doing that with her now and brought her here specifically to heal her. Then he leaves. The next day, Syth goes to Holly as usual and tells her that he read her diary in more depth and discovered that she loves to help people sometimes. He realizes that this is her true self, not the crazy killer who shows no mercy. He tells her that she needs to find that side of herself, and she will definitely find it, and when she does, she will become a healthy and good person. Syth's words anger Holly a lot, and without any warning, she bangs her head against the metal and threatens Syth that if he doesn't let her go, she'll kill herself here one day, and someone will find her. She insists that it's better for both of them if she gets out, but Syth refuses and leaves, feeling scared. He goes to sit in another spot and thinks about what he should do. While he's sitting there, Miss Jondi comes to him and asks him to come to her office to talk. Syth goes to her, and here Jondi tells him that lately, he hasn't been focused on work at all, and if he keeps this up, she'll have to fire him. Syth plays it cool and tells her that he won't do that again and asks her not to fire him, as he won't know how to live. Jondi agrees to his words, and Syth leaves. The next day, Seth comes to Holly and gives her 2 pieces of chocolate as breakfast. He tells her he has reduced his food intake because Holly threatened him the day before. At that moment, Holly apologizes and tells him she dreamed about him last night, that she was married to him in that dream, and that she really loved him in that dream. She wishes to live that life with him. At that time, since Seth doesn't have a girlfriend or a close friend, as we mentioned, he is happy and decides to go out and get her some food. As soon as he leaves the room where the father is, he sees Nate and is surprised. He goes into the room to see what's happening. When he goes down to the basement, he sees Holly, and he gets really scared and can't believe that Seth did that. He keeps trying to open the cage so she can get out. At that moment, Seth arrives, and Holly points to Nate, indicating he should kill him. But Seth doesn't want to do that, so she keeps encouraging him and pointing at Nate until he convinces himself and starts hitting Nate. Holly also helps him by getting her feet out of the cage. She tells him, "Get the rock and hit him on the head." Seth listens to her and grabs a rock and hits him. She tells him again, and he does it. Then she says a 3rd time, and he keeps going until Nate dies. We see that the situation has reversed, and instead of Seth healing her and bringing her back to normal, she has influenced him and turned him into a version of herself, making him a killer without a heart. It's as if he has imprisoned her, but her evil thoughts are still free and have managed to control him. In general, after Nate has died, Holly starts advising Seth on what to do to get rid of the body. Seth does exactly what she tells him to do, cutting up the body and feeding part of it to the dogs as their food. As for the rest of the body, he burns it in the incinerator and gets rid of it. He also learns from Holly what to do so he doesn't get caught. Seth listens to her, and the first thing he does is call Jondi. He tells her that Nate just asked him to watch over the work while he went out to get something and come back, but unfortunately, he didn't return. Jondi becomes worried, and Seth realizes that she will act afterward. Seth goes to Holly and starts cleaning up the blood and any traces of Nate's murder. During this time, Holly seizes the opportunity and plays with Seth's mind, asking him to kill again. She knows it's fun, but Seth continues to fight her devilish thoughts and tells her that he killed Nate just because he discovered their secret, and he won't kill anyone else. At that moment, Holly starts to play on his feelings and tries to seduce him into listening to her, but he doesn't listen. So she pretends to be upset with him, and he feels guilty and goes to the center. Here, he finds a detective named Mira, who continues to investigate the case of Nate's disappearance. Mira is a smart detective and is suspicious of Seth. He doesn't feel comfortable with him. Therefore, he continues to press him with questions, but Seth manages to answer all his questions confidently, so Mira does not suspect him and lets him go. Seth leaves and goes home. The next day, he comes back to the center, as usual, and goes down to Holly, noticing that she hasn't eaten her food. He asks her if she's still upset with him, and Holly tells him she is upset because he says that her kidnapper wants to change her and heal her because he loves her, but all his actions indicate that he doesn't love her and doesn't want her to do what she loves most, which is killing, even though at many times, it would be the right thing to do. At that moment, Seth becomes anxious from this strange talk and realizes that he can't kill again. So she tells him, "Okay, don't kill, but prove to me that you love me." Seth asks her how. She says, "Cut off your finger." Of course, Seth is surprised by this strange request and refuses, and he goes to the center to think to himself. We see here that Seth has literally gone insane, as he keeps thinking about whether he should do as Holly said or not. This shows that Holly was able to completely control him. In the end, he decides to cut off his finger for her, so he takes a knife and goes down, cutting off his finger in front of her to prove that he loves her. At that moment, Holly quickly grabs the knife and puts it to her neck, threatening Seth that if he doesn't open the cage for her, she will kill herself. Of course, someone like Seth, who loves her so crazily, can't handle it, so he opens the cage for her. If only he hadn't done that, because she immediately cuts his throat and exits the place with all elegance. A respectable amount of time passes, and we see that Holly has returned to her normal life and has gone back to her boyfriend Eric. Today, she sees a message on his phone from a girl, and she feels betrayed. She considers killing him but manages to control herself and leaves. She goes to a place where there is a cage, and inside is Seth. We find out that Seth did not die, and currently, Holly has him trapped. Holly talks to him and tells him that she was with Eric today and discovered he was cheating on her, and she was going to kill him, but she didn't do it. She thought of Seth and forgot everything. She tells Seth that she loves him and he's the one who keeps her from killing when she thinks of him. She comes to sit with him, and we see that Seth is happy with what she's saying, thrilled that she's comforting him and playing with the animals. We see that she has completely controlled him, and she will keep him trapped here. And that's it, my friend. This is the end of our sick and strange film, but I hope you enjoyed it in the end. See you in a new summary, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.